Are up to the Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Tes Zayin Amid Beis. The Mishnah is describing the difference between chaylev and dam. Pasuk says v'chol chaylev v'chol dam lo'isei chaylev, so it's in one pasuk, and they're both chayiv kares. But what's the differences between the two? So it says the Mishnah, chaymer b'chaylev mibedam. In some ways, eating chaylev, eating the sacrificial fats. By the way, the chaylev, the basic rule is chaylev by a regular animal is aser because by a carbon it's burnt on the mizbeach. So whatever is burnt on the mizbeach is aser. So the chaylev is the fats that are, we call it sacrificial fats because by a carbon it's a sacrifice, but by a regular cow it's chayiv kares. The point is chaylev in general have a severity that dam does not. V'chaymer b'dam b'chaylev, and sometimes dam is more chamer. In which way? Chaymer b'chaylev. Chaylev is more chamer in the following way. When it comes to carbonos, the fats of the carbon have the following four halachas. Ma'ilin by, if you were to use it or eat it, you would be over me'ila, which was, we'll see, there's no me'ila by dam. Meaning if a person were to use dam of a carbon, it's not me'ila. It's also, but it's not going to bring a chayiv carbon me'ila. Number two is chayiv and alav, mishum pigel, noiser, and tameh. And if you were to eat the chaylev of a carbon that was pigel, you'll be chayiv mishum pigel. If the animal was noiser, so it's past the expiration date, you're chayiv mishum noiser. Tameh, if the animal is kameh, you're chayiv mishum tameh. As opposed to dam. Dam, none of these halachas apply to dam. So if you were to drink the dam of a carbon that was pigel, you would not be over pigel. You'd be over dam, but not pigel. Says the Mishnah, mash'ein kim b'dam. Okay, says the four severities that chaylev has over dam. V'chaymer b'dam, but dam has a severity which is very simple. Chaylev of a chaya is mutter. There are animals that you could eat the chaylev of. There's no animal you could drink the dam of. There you go. The chaylev dam, shadam noyig b'behema chayv oif. The isser of dam applies to behema chayv oif b'mitzvim b'terem. All animals, you're not allowed to drink the blood. But chaylev and a noyig behema terem blood. But chaylev only applies to behema. You could eat the chaylev of a chaya. Okay. Zok the Gemara. Now, the Gemara says like this. We said in the Mishnah, the first halacha is that chaylev, there is me'ila. There is me'ila by chaylev. So the Gemara says, Mino hani mili. How do I know that there's me'ila by chaylev? So the Gemara is going to explain, we're trying to figure out specifically kachim kalim. Rashi speaks this out. Kachim, there's me'ila from the moment you consecrate it, there's me'ila. So there's definitely me'ila by chaylev, because there's me'ila on the entire kachim. Kachim kalim, the halacha is that when you sanctify it, there's no me'ila yet. There's only me'ila when you shecht and you sprinkle the dam. So I sprinkle the dam and I have the fats and I haven't burnt it yet. Right now there's me'ila. So the question is, how do I know there's me'ila on kachim kalim? Because kachim kalim, there's for sure me'ila. There's the whole animal. There's me'ila on the whole animal from the moment you consecrate it. Kachim kalim, which are yours technically until you shecht it. So maybe, how do I know that me'ila begins after zrikas adam? Okay. So how do I know there is me'ila by kachim kalim, the chaylev of kachim kalim? Damar kra, because the pasuk says, kasher yuram mishar zevach hashlamim. The pasuk describes the kohen gadol's bull, his chatas. The kohen gadol brings a chatas, and the pasuk describes the whole chatas. By the way, this chatas is kachim. The pasuk then ends after the entire ceremony, and it says, kasher yuram mishar zevach hashlamim. You treat this kohen gadol's bull chatas like you do a shlamim. That's very strange. First of all, I already know what to do. You tell me all the steps, and then you say, like a shlamim. What does a like a shlamim add? The answer is, it's telling me it's actually reverse. It's not that the shlamim, it's not that the kohen gadol's chatas is like a shlamim. It's that the shlamim is like the kohen gadol's chatas. Just like the pasuk is basically connecting. Just like the kohen gadol's chatas, which is kachim, has me'ila on the chaylev, so too shlamim, which is kachim kalim, have me'ila on the chaylev as well. What is it coming to teach you? This is a reverse pasuk that it seems like you're learning it out from the shlamim, but you're actually learning it towards the shlamim, and that is makish shar zevach hashlamim par kohen mashiach. Makar par mashiach yesh by meila. Avshar zevach hashlamim yesh by meila. So there's meila on the sacrificial fats of a shlamim because it's compared to the chatas, the bull chatas of the kohen gadol. I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky. Yeah, it's tricky because it's not really adding much, to be honest with you. Okay, so the first source that there's chaylev is me'ila is that it's the shlamim is compared to the kohen gadol's bull chatas. Okay. Amalei Rav Chanina said to Rav Yanai, Ku'ura zu sheshana Rebbe. What was wrong with what Rebbe taught? Meaning, why do you need this whole teaching? We already know it from Rebbe. What did Rebbe say? Kol chaylev laHashem, l'rabos emurei kachim kalim me'ila. It says kol chaylev l'Hashem, which means all sacrificial fats have me'ilah. L'rabos emure kach shekam me'ilah. Rabbi already told this before, so what do you need this whole complicated case with the shlam? It's a mefurish pasuk from according to Rabbi. So what do I need both for? So the Gemara says, Rabbi itzurch. The reason why you need both, ikasar rachman chaylev. If you only had Rebbe's drasha, hava min chaylev in yoseres ushtei kloyos lo. I'll tell you why. We were focused on the chaylev, but all sacrificial fats, all that is burnt on the mizbeach, has me'ilah. The pasuk of Rebbe is chaylev l'Hashem. If I just had Rebbe's pasuk, I would think the only thing that's me'ilah is the actual fats. But what about the diaphragm? What about the kidneys that are also burnt on the mizbeach? How do I know there's me'ilah if you misappropriate those? For that, you need Rav Yanai's drasha. They complement each other. Says the Gemara, Havamina chaylev yoser shtikla islo, kasav rachmana kasha yuram. The pasuk then says, no, the shlomim is like the bull chatas. Just like the bull chatas, every aspect of the bull that's burnt on the mizbeach is me'ilah. So that includes the diaphragm and the kidneys. So too, by the shlomim as well. So I need that to teach me that it's not just the chaylev, it's the diaphragm, the kidneys as well. Okay. And if I only had the Rav Yanai's drasha, hava amina chaylev alya delesa b'shar loy. Kasar rachmana kol chaylev. Oh, I'll tell you why. The problem with Rav Yanai's drasha is what? That we learn it out from the bull chatas. Just like the bull chatas has me'ilah, so too the shlom is me'ilah. What does the bull chatas have me'ilah? The parts that's burnt. So that's the fats, check. Diaphragm, check. Kidneys, check. There's actually something that's not burnt by the bull chatas that is burnt by other karbanos, and that's the lamb's tail. The tail of a bull is not burnt on the mizbeach, but the tail of a sheep is. So if I just had the source of learning it out from the bull chatas, I wouldn't know there's me'ilah on the sheep's tail, which is also burnt on the mizbeach. I need the other pasuk to include the sheep's tail. Okay, so you put these two together, you basically have all the rule, and the rule is whatever is burnt on the mizbeach, there's me'ilah. Okay. Here's the Gemara's akasha. It's an interesting question. How do I know that you're not allowed to eat chaylev of an animal? Forget about a carbon. Stam, animal in the butcher shop. I can't eat the chaylev, the fats, the certain fats. Why? Because it's burnt on the mizbeach. So let me just ask you a question. It's very interesting. You're able to eat sheep's tail, right? Halachically, there's no prohibition against sheep's tail, but it was burnt on the mizbeach. That's strange. If it was burnt on the mizbeach, shouldn't that automatically create an isser? Says the Gemara, if you're telling me that the fat of a sheep is considered chaylev, and it's burnt on the mizbeach, so then why are we allowed to eat it? We're allowed to eat kidneys because it's not called a chaylev, but whatever is called chaylev that was burnt on the mizbeach, you're not allowed to eat as a regular, commoner person. If the sheep's tail is considered chaylev and was burnt on the mizbeach, then why are we allowed to go to the butcher shop and eat sheep's tail? It should be aser. Says the Gemara, Amar lei, Alecha Amar Kra, Kol Chaylev Sheva Shar V'Chesav V'Eis, Davar Hashava B'Shar Kesav V'Eis. No. Not everything that's burnt on the mizbeach that's chaylev is aser. It's only if it applies by all animals. So let's say the fat on top of the kidneys, all animals are burnt on the mizbeach, so that's a problem. The fat tail only applies to sheep. So because the fat tail is not burnt by a bull, you're allowed to eat it at home. Okay? Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi Omar, another explanation of why the chaylev of the tail is permitted to be eaten. Chaylev ha'alya ikri, chaylev stamala ikri. He said, I'll tell you why. It's not chaylev. It's called chaylev ha'alya. So because it's not called chaylev stam, you're allowed to eat it. The problem with that is, says the Gemara, elamiyata le'yamaluba, then why is there me'ilah? So that's not a good part. You got to go back to Rizvid. And that is, while it is called chaylev, and it is burnt on the mizbeach, l'chora it should be aser for regular consumption. The answer is, we only say the iser applies if the chaylev is burnt by all animals. And because the tail is only burnt by sheep, it doesn't apply by all animals. Okay. All right. Only a sheep tail do you burn. You don't burn the cow tail on the mizbeach. Now, the Mishnah said that there are 4 halachas that do not apply to dam. There's no me'ilah by dam, there's no pigel by dam, there's no noiser by dam, there's no tameh by dam. Meaning, if you eat them, you'll be over dam, but not the additional stuff. How do I know this? So, Amar Ula, we're going to focus on me'ilah. Amar Kra lachem. The pasuk actually says that the blood is lachem. The lashon of the pasuk is ki nefesh habasar bedamu v'ani nasati lachem. Yeah, if you have something on it. Yeah. The lechem, it's been pretty gross out there recently. So lechem, if you give lechem means that the dam is called lechem. So why does the pasuk saying ani nasati lechem es hadam? What lechem? What do you mean lechem? We sprinkle on the mizbeach. The answer is lechem means that it's not God's. Me'ila means you misappropriate God's possession. The answer is shalachem yehei. It's considered shalachem. It's considered yours, meaning that it's not considered me'ila. It's considered shalachem. Okay. So says the Gemara, the Rabbi Shmuel Tana. The Rabbi Shmuel adds, so the first source that there's no me'ila by dam is because the dam is called lechem. Lechem means Hashem is saying, I'm giving it to you. In that, there's no me'ila. Me'ila means you're using God's property. Lechem means Hashem is saying, I'm giving you the dam. Not that you could eat it, but there's no me'ila. I'm removing me'ila. A second source, the Rabbi Shmuel Tana lechaper. The dam brings a kapara. Lechaper nesativ lo me'ila. Hashem gave dam for kapara and not for me'ila. Okay. Number 3, Rav Yochanan Markra, who means like this? Let me explain outside. Who means that the dam is always the same? Now, we'll see in a moment. After you do the zrikas hadam, l'kuli alma, there's no me'ila. Once the mitzvah is done, everyone agrees me'ila does not apply once the mitzvah is done. That's a general rule. Whenever you have me'ila, it does not apply when the mitzvah is done. It's only before. So before you do zrikas, you catch the blood in a jar, in the bowl, you're walking, now there would be conceptually me'ila. Once you do the zrika, if you want to use that for personal use, there's no me'ila. The pasuk says who, which means that the dam is the same before zrika and after. Just like after zrika, there's no isser me'ila, so too before zrika, there's no isser me'ila as well. You understand? Because who means that the dam is always the same. Before and after zrika have the same halacha. And just like after zrika, there's no isser me'ila. Just like after zrika, there's no isser me'ila, as we'll see in a moment. The isser me'ila never applies when the mitzvah is completed. So after zrika, when the mitzvah is completed, there's l'kuli alma, no isser me'ila. So to lefnei zrika, there's no isser me'ila as well. Says the Gemara. Now, by the way, two things to point out. We have now given three sources as to why there's no me'ila by dam. We have lechem, lechaper, and who. Okay, why do we need 3? We'll get to that in a second. But what's the last one? The focus of the last one is who means that the dam is always the same. Before Zrika and after Zrika. And just like after Zrika there's no Me'ila, as we'll see in a moment, because once the mitzvah is done, there's never Me'ila. So too before Zrika there's no Me'ila as well. So it says the Gemara, maybe the opposite. Maybe it means that it's always the same, that there's always Me'ila. Meaning, you're making this assumption or presumption that after the mitzvah is done, there's no Me'ila. Where do you know this from? So it says the Gemara, there's no such thing as a mitzvah of the Isser Me'ila after the mitzvah is completed. Once the mitzvah is completed, you're not getting a carbon for misappropriating it. Once the mitzvah is done, the Me'ila is removed. Says the Gemara, how do you know this? V'loi, I don't think that's true. What about the Trumas Hadeshin? The Trumas Hadeshin was, you go to the top of the Mizbeach every day, you take the ash of yesterday and clear it off the Mizbeach. And where do you put it? You put it on the side of the Mizbeach. Mitzvah's done, right? You put it down, mitzvah's done. Can you use that ash for personal use? No. So that's an example of the mitzvah being done, and there is me'ila. So what are you talking about? What is this big rule that you've created? V'loi, vari trumas hadeshin denasa mitzvasa u'maylan boy. D'chsiv is samu eitzel ha-mizbeach. That you have to put the trumas hadeshin near the mizbeach, not for personal use. So how could you tell me that after the mitzvah is no isser me'ila? There's an isser me'ila by trumas hadeshin, and the mitzvah is done. So the Gemara says that's the exception. That's the one time. Says the Gemara, trumas hadeshin is different. Why? B'shum to have a trumas hadeshin u'bigdei kuhuna. The rule is that when the mitzvah is done, there's no me'ila. Trumas hadeshin. The answer is there are 2 exceptions. And shnei ksuvim haboim ke'echad. Any time an exception is found twice in the Torah, you don't learn from it. So because this exception is only found twice in the Torah, they're separate. What are the 2 exceptions? Trumas hadeshin, which after the mitzvah is done, you're not allowed to misappropriate the ashes. And the second is big day kahuna. What does that mean, big day kahuna? After the Kohen Gadol is done, right, coming up on Yom Kippur soon, after the Kohen Gadol is done with Yom Kippur, what do you do with the clothing? No one's allowed to use it ever. The Pasuk says, V'hinichem sham, that you shall place the begadim there, meaning no one's allowed to use it, not even himself. He's not allowed to use it throughout the year. Big day kahuna, even though the mitzvah is done, aser and me'ila. So 2 exceptions of the rule are Trumas Hadeshen and the big day Kohen Gadol, which we're assuming right now means it's not allowed to be used ever again. ever, no matter when, not Yom Kippur, not throughout the year, not the Kohen Gadol, nobody. It's not allowed to be used. And the mitzvah is done. So you see that there is an Isser Me'ilah two places. Trumas Hadeshen, Big Day Kahuna, and any time you have a concept that are just found twice, Ein Malamdin. Those are the exceptions, not the rule. If a third, yeah, or just one, you could. But two, huh? No, so the Gemara is going with the presumption at this point that the Big Day Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur is not allowed to be used by, I'm talking the white clothing, is not allowed to be used by anybody. So says the Gemara, that's not so pashit. This makes sense if you believe that if you follow the Rabbanon Shita. That Hinicham Sham means that the Big Day Kohen Gadol is not allowed to be used by anybody, and it requires to be put in shemus. El Ravdosa de Amar Shleishtamish Kohen LeYom Kippur Macher. But they're allowed to be used by a regular, ordinary kohen. Meaning, Rav Daisa believes that the Big Day Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, the white begadim, are not allowed to be used in future Yom Kippurs, but they're allowed to be used throughout the year by a regular kohen. So according to him, it's not aser, there's no isamila, it's allowed to be used. So what are you talking about? Ma'ikal amamar. So says the Gemara, okay, take out Big Day Kohen Gadol, I'll give you a different one. Trumas Hadeshen and Egla Arufa. After Egla Arufa, after you hit it over the back of the head with the axe, the mitzvah's done. You're not allowed to use the animal. It's aser b'hana. So that's an example where the mitzvah is done and there's an Isser Me'ilah, there's an Isser Hana. So you see that even though the mitzvah is done, there's an Isser Hana. So now those are the two, Shnei Ksum Ban Ke'echad. The Gemara says, V'achol Shnei Ksum Ban Ke'echad, Ein Malamdin. So those are the two. So says the Gemara, okay, well this is also making another assumption, that anytime you have two exceptions, you can't learn out from it. There is a Tana who believes that even if a mitzvah is found twice, you're allowed to learn out from it. So you're telling me that once the mitzvah is done, there's no Isser Me'ilah, and that's why who is telling me that after atonement is like before atonement, that after atonement the dam there's no Me'ilah, so to before atonement as well, because there's no Me'ilah after the mitzvah, and the source is because it's found twice. Trumas Hadesh and Egla Rufa, but there are opinions that say you can learn out from Shnei Ksuvim B'Kayachad. So according to that, how do you know there's no Isser Me'ilah? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why, go to the next page, Trei Miyute Ksiv. Hacha Ksiv is Samoi, of Samu, Hachaksiv Harufa. It's not just that it's written twice. Each one it's written in an exclusionary way. This Samu means this one as opposed to others. Harufa is this one as opposed to others. So it's not just that it's written twice. It's written in a way that is Hashem's way of saying do not apply to other cases. Okay? So by the way, what we were looking for, just to finish up the parak, we had 4 halachas that dam is different. Dam does not apply to Me'ilah, Pigel, Noiser, Tameh. We found 3 sources for Me'ilah. Nothing for anything else. It's kind of a fail. So the Gemara says, you're right. Those sources that we had by Me'ilah, they're unnecessary because you don't need 3. Apply them. So you got 1 for Me'ilah, apply 1 to Tameh, 1 to Noiser, and Pigel you don't need a pasuk for. I'll tell you why. The rule of Pigel is, Pigel always means, right, that you're doing the Maisa, there's a matir and there's a nitar. I don't know if you remember this. That there's the thing that you're doing that permits something else. So the Zrikas Hadam is matir achilas basar, right? So the Zrikas Hadam is the matir and the basar is the nitar. The rule is that Pigel only applies to the nitar, to the thing that becomes permitted. So there's an Isser Pigel, that means that if you do Zrika with the intention to burn the carbon at the wrong day, then if you eat the carbon, you're chayiv. Pigel only applies to the nitar, not the matir. The dam is the matir, therefore Pigel doesn't apply. You don't need a pasuk for it. Says the Gemara, Tlasa Kra Lamali Bedam, Chalim Mivte Noiser, Chalim Mivte Me'ilah, Chalim Mivte Tuma, Ava Pigel Eitzar Kra, Titnan, Kol Sheish Matir, and Bein La'adam, Bein Lamizbeh, Chayim Misham Pigel, the dam Gufe Matir. So because dam is the matir, there is no Pigel, there's no Isser Pigel, you don't need a pasuk for it. Hajin Allah, Kol HaBasar. Okay, we're going to start the new parak. Let me just give a 2-minute intro that will make it a little bit easier. The crux of at least the beginning of this parak is that there's 2 different types of tumah. There's called tumas oichlin and tumas nevela. Okay, tumas oichlin means that food that becomes tameh is able to transmit tumah to others. So if an apple becomes tameh because a sheretz touched it, the apple then can transmit tumah to a banana if it touches the banana. It has to have wet first. We all know. Fine. Here's the rule: for food to be able to transmit tumah to others, it has to be the size of a kibeya. Okay, that's it. Now, nevela is also able to transmit tumah as long as, what's the size of it? Is it also kibeya? Probably shouldn't check that before. I think tumas. No, it's kazais. Sorry. So tumas oichlin to transmit tuma, it has to be a kebeya. Nevela to transmit tuma, that if you touch a dead carcass of an animal, the piece of the carcass has to be a kazais. Okay. One more halacha that you got to know. There's a concept in tuma called a yad and a shomer. A yad and a shomer means that sometimes food will have stuff attached to it that's not actually edible, but it's still considered part of the food. Shomer means what protects the food, the shell. The yad is the stem that you use to pick it up. Those things also will transmit tumah. So I'll give you an example. You have an apple that's tameh, and the apple stem touches a banana, the banana's tameh. Even though it didn't touch the apple, it touched the yad. Or if it touched the shell of a walnut, it'll transmit tumah, even though it didn't touch the flesh of the walnut. So the yad and the shomer, same thing with the nevela as well. If it touched the bone of the nevela or the hide of the nevela, that's the shomer, that's the yad. There's just one exception, and that's this Mishnah. The only difference between a nevela and food, they both have yad, they both have a shomer, different sizes. One's kabeya, one's kazai, is fine, but there's one major difference, and that is, by tumas oichlin, the shomer can be used to actually make the size of the kabeya. So I'll give you an example. You have the pomegranate shell, okay? You need for it to be a kabeya. It's only a kabeya with the shell, it will transmit tumah. But by a nevela, if I have a piece of a dead animal that's only a kazayis with the hide, doesn't count. That is the major difference between the two. The shomer, is it mitzdarif? Is the shomer mitzdarif? That is the major difference. So let's see the Mishnah. The Mishnah says like this: ha'ar, the hide, that's the shomer. This is of nevela. Haroitiv, the gravy. Now these are things that are eaten with it, but they're not meat. So the gravy that comes off of the meat. Hakifa is the spices. Ha'alol is like little strands of meat, but it's not considered the ikar basar. Ha'atzamos, the bones. Hagidin, the sinews. Hakanaim, the horns. Hatzlafim, the hooves. Mitzdarfin l'tamei tumas oichlin. Avoloi l'tumas nevelos. They do combine for tumas oichlin, for the standard tumah of a kabeya food, all of these, because they're shoymrim or yadois, they would combine, but not for nevela. For nevela, you need it to be a kazayis of basar mamish. Not a kazayis including the bone, not a kazayis including the hide. So that's an example where it's mitzdareh for tumas oichlin, but not tumas nevela. One more halacha the Mishnah gives. Okay, for tumas oichlin, it has to be food. What's defined as food? So that you could eat, right? If you can't eat it, it's not food. So here's the situation. The rule is, when are Jews allowed to eat meat? When you shecht it. If I shecht it, the animal could be flopping around. I'm allowed to eat it, and it's not Ever Menachai, because the Torah says that when you shecht basar, it's considered dead in halacha, not for goyim. When goyim shecht, it is not enough. If the animal's still flopping around, it is not considered edible for a goy, and a goy would be Ever Menachai. So if a goy goes over and stabs an animal in the neck, and it's still flopping around, that is Ever Menachai. So says the Mishnah, Ki boy, hashoichet behema tmeya lo'evik gechavim. A Jew shechs a chazer for a guy. So let me ask you a question. Stop right here. It's flopping around. Mafreches. It's flopping around. Is this considered food in halacha to transmit tumah? So I would say no, because I can't eat it because it's chazer. A guy can't eat it because it's still flopping around, and it's even menachai. There's a special chiddush, as the Gemara will explain. Because it was shechted by a Jew, and shechita is recognized as a Jewish thing that we define food when it's shechted, and I shechted it to give it to a guy, then it's considered food in halacha, despite the fact that it's flopping around. Even though I can't eat it, a guy can't eat it at this point, it's still considered oichlin, but it's not a nevela, because a tumas nevela only applies when the animal is dead. So food is when it's halachically considered food. Nevela is when it's considered dead. Says the Mishnah, Matama Tumas Eichlin, Avaloin Tumas Nevelas, Thomas Ashiyatis is Reisha. It's only transmit Tumas Nevela when the head actually is cut off or when it's actually dead. Just to summarize, riba latame tumas oichlin mimasher riba latame tumas nevelos. We've had examples where it's considered more inclusive for tumas oichlin, but not for tumas nevelos. Again, the major difference being that for tumas oichlin, the yad and the shomer are mitzdarif. They combine together to make the kabeya, but not for nevelos. Rav Yehuda Omer, one last point, and we'll just do a little bit of the Gemara. We said in the Mishnah that the olol will describe what it is. Pashas, it means like strands of meat. It's not considered meat for tumas nevela. Rav Yehuda disagrees. Ha'olol hamakunis. If you were to have a gathered amount of olol, im yesh by kazayis makamechad, a kazayis of it chayav alav, that would be tumas nevela. Okay, just to do a little bit of the Gemara very quickly, the Mishnah's main point is that for tumas oichlin, all of the shomer and the yad are mitzdarif to make the kebeya, but they're not mitzdarif to make the kazayis of nevela. That's the major halacha. So it says the Gemara, Tanidol had the Tarabana. The truth is, there's a brisa that speaks to that mafurish. What does the brisa say? Shoimrim l'tuma kala. The shoimrim are mitzdarif for a lighter tuma, i.e. tumas oichlin. V'loy shoimrim l'tuma chamura, but it's not mitzdarif for the heavier tuma, i.e. tumas nevela. What's the source? Shomer l'tuma kalmana. And how do I know that the shomer is considered mitzdarif for tumas oichlin? Meaning that if I have a wheat or I have a pomegranate, that the shell makes it a kabeya, now it's able to transmit tumah. How do I know this? Tana the Rabbi Shmuel, al kol zera zerua asher yizareya. The pasuk describes the tumah as a seed that you plant that is planted, meaning that by food, it's the normal way that you plant. When you plant it with the shell. That it's the normal way that people take it out for planting, which is chita b'klipasoi, wheat in its husk, sar b'klipasoi, barley in the husk, adashim b'klipasoi, lentils in the husk. So because the pasuk describes it as the normal way of planting, not the way you eat it, which is not with the shell, it's the way you plant it with the shell, that means that the shell is mitzdarif to make the shear. That's for tumas oichlin, but tumas nevela is not like that. Tumas nevela, the kazayis is not mitzdarif. How do I know this? The pasuk says if you touch the carcass, a kazayis of the carcass, but not hide that does not have a kazayis on it. The Gemara is going to clarify what this means. Then the brisa says, if I touch the or that does not have a kazayis, I'm not tameh. But you might think if I touch the or, I'm not tameh, tameh yitma. What's going on? The words don't flow at all. It starts off by saying that I'm not tameh, then it says you might think I'm not tameh, yitma. So what's going on? Maika Omar, we'll end with this. Amarav of Amrila Kadi, Chasuri Mechse V'achi Katani. This is what the brisa should say, and it's very, very easy to read, and that is B'niv Lasa. If you touch a kazayis of the nevela, you're tameh. V'loi ba'or she'ena love kazayis basar, but not hide that does not have a kazayis basar. V'or mashlima lekazayis, and the hide makes the kazayis. Meaning, if you have a situation where the hide makes it a kazayis, where the shomer would be mitzdarif to make a kazayis, it's not transmit tumah. But yachol shani moitzi af or she'esh lekazayis basar. But let's say you have a kazayis already, and I touch the hide, then you're tameh, because then you touched the shomer. The shomer is not mitzdarif for tumah, but the shomer will be able to transmit tumah. So because it's the yad or the shomer, it's not able to be mitzdarif, but it's able to transmit the tumah if there's already kazayis basar. I will stop here.